The first sign that something was wrong wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a single sentence, spoken casually, over the phone, 3 weeks before my wedding. "Just so you know," my mother said, her voice light, almost distracted, "your father and I will be handling the guest list changes. It's easier that way." I remember standing in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the calendar on the wall. June. Everything was already planned, paid for, deposits locked in. I'd spent 18 months coordinating every detail myself, because I'd learned early not to expect help without strings attached. "What changes?" I asked. "Oh, nothing major," she replied quickly. "Just adjustments. You'll understand." That was the moment. The first small crack. The kind you ignore because you want peace more than truth. My name is Hannah Whitmore. I was 34 years old then. Old enough to know when something felt off. Young enough to still believe that love, even complicated love, meant consideration. I was wrong. The wedding was supposed to be simple. A lakeside venue in upstate New York. Late afternoon, close friends, immediate family. No spectacle, no family performance, just one day that belonged to me and the man I chose, not the family I came from. My parents had other ideas. I grew up in a family that looked perfect from the outside. Big house, holiday cards, charity events. My father, Douglas Whitmore, built a regional construction company from the ground up. My mother, Elaine, curated our lives the way some women curate living rooms. Everything in place, nothing out of line. And then there was my sister, Rachel, 2 years younger, louder, more fragile, according to my parents. The kind of child adults tiptoed around, mistaking volatility for sensitivity. Rachel needed more: attention, accommodation, forgiveness. And over time, the family learned to orbit her moods. I learned to stay still. It wasn't that my parents disliked me. That would have been easier. They simply didn't worry about me. I was capable, independent, the one who would be fine. Those words followed me everywhere. When I paid my own tuition, "You'll be fine." When I moved out at 22, "You'll be fine." When I took over the admin side of my father's company during a brutal winter when half his management team quit, "You're so reliable. We don't have to worry about you." Being fine became my role. So when my mother said she was adjusting the guest list, I told myself it didn't matter, that it was probably about distant relatives or business acquaintances, that she wouldn't interfere with something as personal as my wedding. The next crack came a week later. I received an email from the venue coordinator. Polite, professional. "Hi, Hannah. Just confirming the revised seating chart sent by Mrs. Whitmore. Please let us know if this reflects your wishes." Revised. I opened the attachment. My name wasn't at the head table. Instead, it was my sister's. Bride's sister, placed prominently next to my parents. My fiancé, Mark, had been moved to the opposite side, and I had been seated slightly off-center, paired with an uncle I barely knew. I felt something go cold in my chest. I called my mother immediately. "Oh, that," she said, as if discussing floral arrangements. "Rachel's been having such a hard time lately. We thought it would be best if she felt supported." "It's my wedding," I said. "Yes," my mother replied, her tone tightening, "but it's still a family event." That sentence sat between us, heavy and unmovable. A family event. Not my day. Not my choice. Not my boundary. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply said, "I'll look at it," and hung up. That night, Mark asked me if I was okay. "I think my parents are reorganizing my wedding," I said. He frowned. "Without you?" "Yes." He reached for my hand. "Do you want me to talk to them?" "No," I said, immediately. That reflex was automatic. Protect the peace, absorb the discomfort, handle it quietly. But for the first time, something inside me hesitated, because this didn't feel like overstepping. It felt like rehearsal. The final crack came 2 days later, when my father called. "Hannah," he said, skipping any greeting, "we need to discuss the trust." I froze. "What trust?" I asked. A pause. "The family trust," he said, as if it were obvious. "With the wedding coming up, it's time to finalize some things." Finalize. I'd never been part of those conversations. Never invited. Never informed. "What things?" I asked carefully. "Distribution," he replied. "Future planning. It's mostly administrative." Administrative. That word would haunt me later. We'll explain everything after the wedding, he added. No need to burden you now. Burden. I hung up and sat very still. In the quiet of my apartment, pieces began to line up. The guest list, the seating chart, the sudden urgency around documents I'd never seen. This wasn't about helping Rachel feel supported. This was about positioning. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know why. But I knew one thing, with absolute clarity. They were making decisions that affected my life, and they were doing it without me. The wedding was no longer the point. It was leverage. And I was about to find out exactly how much of my life had been arranged while I wasn't looking. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious in the usual way, not the fluttering chest or racing thoughts I'd grown used to whenever my family applied quiet pressure. This was different. My mind was calm, too calm, like something had finally clicked into place and refused to be ignored. By morning, I knew I needed information, not reassurance, not explanations, facts. I took the day off work and drove to my parents' house unannounced. It was a Thursday, late morning. My mother would be home. She always was. The house looked exactly as it always had. White columns, immaculate lawn, curtains drawn just enough to suggest privacy, not secrecy. She seemed surprised to see me, but only briefly. "Hannah," she said, stepping aside. "You should have called." "I know," I replied, walking in. "I didn't want to." She stiffened, then smoothed it away with a practiced smile. "Coffee?" "No." That too landed harder than I expected. We sat at the kitchen island. Same stools we'd sat on for years. Same vase of fresh flowers. My mother's world was frozen in a permanent state of presentability. "I want to see the trust," I said. Her fingers paused on the countertop, just for a second. "Why?" she asked. "Because my name is being moved around at my own wedding," I replied. "And Dad called about distribution like it was routine." She exhaled slowly. "You're overthinking this." "No," I said. "I'm noticing it." She turned to face me fully. "Hannah, sweetheart, you're stressed. Weddings do that." "I've planned everything myself," I said evenly. "This is the first time I wasn't consulted." Her eyes sharpened. "We're trying to help." "With what?" I asked. "With family harmony," she said. "Rachel's struggling." There it was again. Rachel's needs, floating above everything else like a permanent justification. "I'm not responsible for Rachel's emotions," I said quietly. My mother's lips pressed together. "You've always been so firm." I almost smiled. "I'm asking for the trust documents," I repeated. She hesitated longer this time. "Your father isn't here." "Then I'll wait." That did it. She stood abruptly, walked to the study, and returned with a thin folder. Not thick, not comprehensive, just enough to feel intentional. She slid it across the counter. "This is a summary," she said, "not the full document." I opened it. The language was dense but familiar. I'd worked in contracts long enough to understand what was being said, and more importantly, what wasn't. There were 2 named beneficiaries, Rachel, and then, conditionally, me. Conditional distribution based on demonstrated involvement in the family business and ongoing support of family obligations. My stomach tightened. "What obligations?" I asked. She avoided my eyes. "You know, showing up, being present." "At my wedding?" I asked. She flinched. "This was never meant to punish you," she said. "It's an incentive." "Incentive for what?" I pressed. "For staying connected," she replied. "For not drifting." I closed the folder. "You tied my inheritance to compliance," I said. She bristled. "That's unfair." "No," I said. "It's accurate." Silence stretched between us. "You've always done what you wanted," she said finally. "Rachel needed more guidance." "And I needed consent," I replied. She shook her head. "You're making this about control." "Because it is." She looked genuinely startled by that, like the word itself had never crossed her mind. "Hannah," she said softly, "if you go down this path, you'll hurt people." I stood up. "You went down this path first," I said. "You just didn't think I'd see it." I left without the folder. In the car, my hands shook for the first time. Not fear. Anger. Not explosive anger. Something sharper, more focused. They hadn't just adjusted my wedding. They'd adjusted my future. And they'd done it quietly, assuming my silence would hold. By the time I got home, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I needed someone who understood documents better than emotions. I called an old contact from my time helping my father's company. A lawyer he'd clashed with years ago over a zoning issue. Someone who'd always treated me like I was in the room, not adjacent to it. Evan Morales, he answered. It's Hannah Whitmore, I said. I need advice. There was a pause. Then, I was wondering when you'd call. That was the moment I knew this wasn't new to him, and it wasn't going to stay quiet much longer. Evan didn't invite me to his office. He suggested a diner. That alone told me he understood what kind of conversation this was going to be. We met on the east side of town, the kind of place where lawyers, contractors, and city inspectors all ate the same eggs and didn't bother pretending they weren't listening to one another. Evan arrived before me, already seated in a booth near the window, jacket draped over the back of the seat. Hannah, he said, standing briefly. You look exactly how I expected. Tired? I asked. Alert, he corrected. That's more dangerous. I ordered coffee. Black. No small talk. I saw a summary of the Whitmore Trust years ago, he said once the waitress left. Not the full thing. Just enough to notice what wasn't standard. I didn't interrupt. Conditional inheritance tied to family involvement is rare, he continued. Not illegal, but it's often used to shape behavior. To control it, I said. Yes, he agreed. Especially when one child is seen as stable and the other as fragile. Rachel again. When did this start? I asked. About 5 years ago, Evan said. Right after your father restructured the company. My chest tightened. I helped with that. I know, he said. You drafted half the internal transition memos. A memory surfaced. Long nights at my parents' dining table, spreadsheets, contracts. My father thanking me for being reliable. My mother bringing tea and telling me how grateful they were. All of it had felt like trust. You were never added as an owner, Evan said carefully. But you were treated like one when it came to responsibility. And risk, I added. He nodded. Exactly. I stared into my coffee. So what are they doing now? I asked. Evan leaned back. They're consolidating. Assets, influence, optics. Optics for what? For the wedding, he said. And what comes after? I looked up. After? Hannah, he said gently. Your wedding isn't the event. It's the deadline. That landed hard. They want everything settled before you legally join another family, he continued. Before your priorities shift beyond their reach. Mark. They don't trust that marriage won't dilute their influence, Evan added. So they're locking things in. I felt a slow, steady anger spread through my chest. What aren't they telling me? I asked. Evan hesitated. That answer depends on how far you're willing to go, he said. Because once you ask for full disclosure, there's no unasking. I'm not asking anymore, I said. I'm preparing. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Then here's what I recommend, he said. Don't confront them. Don't negotiate emotionally. And don't change the wedding. I frowned. Why not? Because right now, he said, they think you're still manageable. That word again. Let them, he continued. Meanwhile, you request the full trust documents formally, in writing, through counsel. Won't that escalate things? I asked. Yes, he said calmly. But it also creates a record. A record. I was starting to understand the value of that word. And if they refuse? I asked. They won't, he replied. Not immediately. People who rely on silence panic when it's threatened. I left the diner with a plan and a sense of gravity I hadn't felt before. This wasn't about feelings anymore. It was about leverage. That evening, I sat with Mark on the couch and told him everything. Not in pieces, not softened. The trust, the conditions, the seating chart, the quiet urgency around paperwork. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he didn't say what I expected. They're afraid of losing you, he said. I shook my head. No, they're afraid of losing control. He nodded slowly. Then what do you want to do? I thought about the version of myself I'd been trained to be. Agreeable, quiet. The one who made things easier for everyone else. I want to stop being arranged, I said. The next day, Evan sent a formal request on my behalf. Polite, neutral, professional. Request for complete trust documentation and any amendments or related agreements. No accusations. No ultimatums, just a request. My mother responded within the hour. Of course, we'll gather everything. No need to involve outsiders. Outsiders. That word made me smile. 2 days later, Rachel called me. Not my mother. Not my father. Rachel. Her voice was unsteady. Hannah, she said. Did you know Mom and Dad were changing things? I closed my eyes. What things? I asked. The trust, she said. They asked me to sign something. Just a confirmation. Confirmation of what? That I've been involved in the business, she said. That I've supported the family. I pictured it instantly. The narrative being cemented. What did you sign? I asked. I didn't, she said. Not yet. That surprised me. I wanted to talk to you first, she added. They said you'd understand. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Did they? I said. She hesitated. They said you were busy, focused on your own life. Translation? I was already written out. Rachel, I said carefully, did they tell you my share was conditional? Silence. Then, quietly, there it was. The truth they'd assumed would never surface between us. I need time, Rachel said. This feels wrong. I didn't reassure her. I didn't comfort her. That feeling is important, I said. Don't ignore it. We hung up, and I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights flickering on as dusk settled in. They'd underestimated one thing, not my strength, my attention. The documents were coming. I could feel it. And once they arrived, the version of me they'd counted on would be gone for good. The documents arrived on a Monday morning, delivered by courier in a thick, unmarked envelope. That alone told me everything I needed to know. My parents had never sent anything quietly, unless they believed volume would overwhelm scrutiny. They relied on the assumption that people didn't read what felt heavy, that they trusted titles, signatures, and family bonds more than fine print. I waited until the evening to open it. Mark was out. The apartment was silent. I spread the papers across the dining table, the way I'd learned to do years ago when my father taught me how to review contracts. Clause by clause. No assumptions. No sentiment. The trust was more complex than the summary my mother had shown me. Multiple amendments. Timelines that coincided neatly with moments in my life I'd thought were unrelated. The year I moved in with Mark. The year I declined a role in my father's company to take a promotion elsewhere. The year Rachel briefly joined the business and then quietly stepped away. Each decision had triggered a recalibration. My share didn't disappear all at once. It thinned, deferred, conditioned, redirected. And then there was the wedding clause, a provision stating that any beneficiary who demonstrated material disengagement from family cohesion during a major family event could have distributions delayed indefinitely at the trustees' discretion. Trustees, plural. I flipped to the back. Both trustees were my parents. I felt something settle in my chest. Not shock. Not heartbreak. Recognition. My wedding wasn't being adjusted to accommodate Rachel. It was being staged to test me. If I complied, if I accepted the seating change, the guest list manipulation, the quiet removal of my authority over my own event, it would serve as proof of continued alignment, of cohesion, of obedience without the word ever being used. If I pushed back, it would be documented as disengagement. I closed the folder slowly. That night, my father called. "Hannah," he said, his tone lighter than it had been in weeks. "Did you receive the documents?" "Yes," I replied. "Good," he said. "I'm glad we can be transparent." Transparent. "I have a few questions," I said. "Of course," he replied. "We expected that." That phrase caught my attention. Expected. Why wasn't I told about the wedding clause? I asked. A pause. "It's standard," he said. "Meant to protect family unity. By controlling behavior," I said. "Hannah," my mother cut in, clearly on speaker now. "You're interpreting this emotionally." "No," I said calmly. "I'm interpreting it legally." Silence. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," my father said. "I didn't make it," I replied. "You wrote it." Another pause. "Hannah," my mother said softly, "this isn't the hill you want to die on." That sentence ended something for me. "I'm not dying on it," I said. "I'm stepping off it." They both spoke at once then. Reassurances, explanations, familiar words layered to blur clarity. I listened. Quietly. When they finally stopped, I said one thing. "I won't be signing anything related to the trust until after the wedding." My father's voice sharpened. "That's not reasonable." It's necessary, I said. For me. You're being difficult, my mother said. No, I replied. I'm being precise. I hung up before they could respond. The next morning, Evan called. They contacted me, he said. That was fast, I replied. They're concerned, he said. Which tells me they didn't expect you to read as closely as you did. What happens now? I asked. That depends on you, he said. If you want to preserve peace, you can play along. And if I don't, they'll escalate, he said. Subtly at first. How? By reframing you, he said. To relatives, to Rachel, possibly to Mark. That last part made my jaw tighten. They won't attack, Evan continued. They'll express concern, paint you as overwhelmed, unstable, influenced. I thought of the seating chart, the guest list, the trust clause. They've been doing that my whole life, I said. Yes, he replied. But now it's strategic. That afternoon, Rachel showed up at my apartment. She looked smaller than usual, less sure of herself. Like the world had shifted slightly and she hadn't adjusted yet. They're upset, she said, standing awkwardly by the door. I know, I replied. They said you're trying to control everything, she continued. That the wedding stress is getting to you. I met her eyes. What do you think? I asked. She hesitated. I think they're scared, she said finally. That surprised me. Of what? I asked. That you won't need them anymore, she said. That you'll leave. I considered that. They're not afraid of losing me, I said. They're afraid of losing leverage. Rachel sat down heavily on the couch. They asked me again to sign, she said. The confirmation. Did you? I asked. No, she replied. I told them I needed to understand what I was confirming. I nodded. Good. She looked at me, her eyes glossy. What happens if I don't? I didn't soften my answer. Then they'll be disappointed, I said. And you'll survive it. She swallowed. They've never been disappointed in me, she said. I thought about that. About the cost of being the one they never worried about. Neither had they in me, I said. They just hid it better. When Rachel left, I sat alone again. Documents stacked neatly, my phone face down on the table. The wedding was in 12 days. I could feel the pressure building, tightening around timelines, expectations, narratives. They thought time would force my compliance. They didn't know I'd already decided something irreversible. The wedding would go forward, but it would no longer be the event they were planning around. It would be the moment I stopped being manageable. And once that happened, the trust wouldn't be the only thing under review. The pressure didn't come all at once. It arrived in polite messages, concerned phone calls, and carefully worded comments passed through other people, like secondhand smoke. My aunt called first. Hannah, your mother mentioned you seem overwhelmed, she said gently. Weddings can do that to even the strongest women. Strong again. Always that word, used like a compliment, used like a leash. Then a cousin texted, asking if everything was okay between me and Mark. She'd heard things felt tense. I hadn't told anyone about the trust. They were doing that work for me. By Friday, my parents hadn't called directly. They didn't need to. The message was clear. If I didn't fall back into line, the story would be told without me in it. Mark noticed immediately. They're circling, he said one night as we sat on the couch, the guest list spreadsheet open on his laptop. This feels coordinated. It is, I replied. They're reframing me. He closed the laptop. Then stop letting them. I looked at him. How? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Take control of something they can't touch. That night, I emailed the venue. I requested a meeting. In person. Just me. No parents, no helpers. The coordinator replied within minutes. Of course. We've noticed some conflicting instructions and would appreciate clarification. Conflicting instructions. Saturday morning, I sat across from the coordinator and her assistant in a sunlit office overlooking the lake. I brought copies of every contract I'd signed, every invoice I'd paid, every email thread where decisions had been routed through me. I want to be very clear, I said calmly. Any changes to the wedding require my written approval, not my parents', not my sister's. Mine. The coordinator nodded, visibly relieved. That will make things much easier, she said. We've received several directives that didn't align. I'm aware, I replied. We went through everything. Seating, guest list, ceremony order, the head table. My name went back where it belonged. When I left, my phone buzzed. My mother. You embarrassed us. she said without preamble. The venue called. I clarified. I replied. You undermined us, she snapped. No, I said. I removed you. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Do you know what people will think? She asked. I don't care, I said. Silence. You're changing, she said finally. Yes, I replied. Intentionally. She hung up on me. That afternoon, Evan called. They're escalating, he said. How? I asked. They've requested an amendment meeting, he replied. Urgent. They want you present. Before the wedding, I said. Yes, I laughed quietly. Of course they do. This is where you need to decide something, Evan said. If you attend, you legitimize the pressure. If you don't, they'll claim you're disengaging. I thought about the clause. Material disengagement during a major family event. They set the trap, I said. Yes, Evan replied. But traps only work if you step where they expect. What if I redefine the event? I asked. There was a pause. Tell me what you're thinking, he said. I won't disengage, I said. I'll document. That evening, I drafted an email to my parents, copied to Evan. I will not attend any trust-related meetings before the wedding. Any amendments, discussions, or confirmations can be scheduled after. This is not disengagement. It is boundary setting. Please consider this formal notice. I sent it and turned my phone off. The next day, Rachel came over again. This time, she didn't sit. They're furious, she said. They say you're holding the wedding hostage. I'm protecting it, I replied. They're asking me to choose, she said, her voice shaking. They say if I don't sign, it shows where my loyalty is. I studied her carefully. And where is it? I asked. She looked at the floor. I don't know anymore. That answer mattered. They've always told me you were different, she continued. That you didn't need the same things. That you'd leave anyway. I felt a familiar ache. Not new, just finally named. And what do you think? I asked. She swallowed. I think they're afraid of you now. I nodded. Good. She looked up sharply. Good? Yes, I said. Fear is the first honest emotion they've shown in years. She sat down heavily. They asked me to move into the house temporarily, she said. After the wedding. To help Mom. There it was. The replacement. They're consolidating, I said. Again. She covered her face with her hands. I don't want to be used like this, she whispered. Then don't be, I said. But that choice has consequences. She looked at me, eyes wide. You're not afraid of losing them? I thought about the documents, the clauses, the manipulation dressed as concern. I already lost the version of them that loved freely, I said. What's left is management. She was quiet for a long time. When she stood to leave, she turned back. I didn't sign, she said. I nodded. That's enough. After she left, I sat alone in the dim light of the apartment. Wedding invitations stacked neatly on the table. 5 days until the ceremony. My parents were running out of time. And when people like them feel time closing in, they make mistakes. I could feel it coming. The question wasn't whether they'd act. It was how far they'd go when they realized I wasn't backing down. 3 days before the wedding, my father made his move. Not directly. He was too careful for that. I found out through my bank. I was standing in line for coffee when my phone buzzed with a fraud alert. A pending transaction. Large. Unusual. Linked to an account I hadn't touched in months. An account I'd once co-signed. I stepped out of line and opened the alert. It was a wire transfer request, tied to Whitmore Holdings, the shell entity my father used for internal family transfers. My name wasn't listed as the initiator, but it was listed as authorization support. They were moving money using my signature history. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I called Evan. They're trying to create a financial event, he said after I explained. Something urgent. Something that forces you to cooperate. Before the wedding, I said. Yes, he replied. If they can show instability or conflict tied to you, they can justify delaying or reallocating distributions. And if I intervene? I asked. They'll say you're interfering, he said. If you don't, they'll say you consented. I closed my eyes. So what do? You document and freeze, Evan said. Now. I drove straight to my bank branch. I didn't call my parents. I didn't warn them. I sat across from a manager I'd worked with years earlier and calmly requested a review of all accounts where my authorization had ever been used. She frowned as she read the screen. This is irregular, she said carefully. I agree, I replied. Please note that I do not consent to any transactions using my historical authorization, effective immediately. She nodded. We'll place a temporary hold pending review. When I walked out, my phone rang. My father, I answered. What did you do? He demanded. I protected myself, I replied. You froze a necessary transfer, he snapped. You had no right. I had every right, I said. My name was attached. This was for the family, he said. No, I replied. This was for control. You're sabotaging us, he said. I'm stepping out of your leverage, I said. Silence. Then his voice dropped. You don't understand the consequences. I do, I replied. I just accept them. He hung up. That afternoon, my mother sent a message. You're forcing us into an impossible position. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back. You put me there, years ago. I turned my phone off. That night, Mark came home early. He could tell immediately something had shifted. They tried to use me financially, I said. He nodded. I figured. I froze it, I said. He smiled, slow and steady. Good. Something's coming, I added. They won't let this go quietly. They don't have to, he said. You're not responsible for how they react. The next morning, Evan called. They've contacted the trust attorney, he said, claiming you're acting erratically. Of course they were. They're laying groundwork, he continued. If they can frame you as unstable before the wedding, they can justify invoking the cohesion clause. And if they try? I asked. Then we challenge it, he said. But Hannah, if they do this publicly, it will fracture the family completely. I thought about that, about the way they'd already fractured it, quietly. Then let it be visible, I said. That evening, Rachel called me in tears. They're furious, she said. Dad's saying you're trying to destroy everything. I'm not, I said gently. I'm refusing to be used. They asked me to speak at the rehearsal dinner, she said. They want me to talk about family unity. I closed my eyes. They want a narrative, I said. I don't want to lie, she whispered. Then don't, I replied. Silence is allowed, she sniffed. What if I say nothing? Then you've said everything, I said. After we hung up, I sat alone. The apartment quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. 2 days left. They'd tried emotional pressure. They'd tried social pressure. Now, they'd tried financial pressure. There was only one move left. Legal. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. And when it came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be a piece of paper. And once signed, it would change everything. The document arrived the next morning, not by courier this time, by email, sent to me, Evan, and my mother's personal attorney, all in the same thread. No greeting, no explanation, just an attachment and a single line from my father. We need this executed today. I didn't open it immediately. I forwarded it to Evan and waited. His reply came less than 5 minutes later. Do not sign this, under any circumstances. That was all I needed to read. When I finally opened the attachment, I understood why my father had rushed it. It was a temporary trustee consent, an emergency delegation of authority. Dense, technical, written to look routine. It framed the bank freeze as a disruption caused by my unavailability and requested that I voluntarily delegate any residual consent rights to my parents until after the wedding. Voluntarily, until after the wedding. If I signed it, they'd regain control of every account, every mechanism they'd just lost. They'd also have written proof that I'd stepped aside during a major family event. Material disengagement. Trigger clause. It was elegant. I'll give him that. I closed the document and felt something settle deep in my chest. Not panic. Finality. This was the line. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to Evan's office. He was already on the phone when I arrived, voice low, precise. He waved me in and continued speaking, using words like unilateral action, fiduciary risk, and coercive timing. When he hung up, he looked at me steadily. They're panicking, he said. This document is an attempt to box you in. And if I don't sign, I asked? They'll escalate publicly, he said. They'll claim you're unstable, obstructive, possibly being influenced. I nodded. They've been building that story for weeks. Yes, he said, but here's the thing. He slid a folder toward me. They miscalculated, he continued. They forgot one detail. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails I'd sent years ago while helping manage my father's company. Instructions, decisions, financial approvals. all with his explicit consent, all time-stamped. You were acting in a fiduciary capacity, Evans said, without title, but with authority. And risk, I added. Yes, he said, which means this. He tapped the document on the table. This is coercion, he said. Plain and simple. What do we do? I asked. He didn't hesitate. We respond, he said. Formally, in writing, declining to sign and placing them on notice. Before the wedding, I said. Yes, he replied. Today. My phone buzzed while we drafted the response. Rachel. I let it ring once, then answered. They're asking me to sign something too, she said breathlessly. A statement. About your behavior. My jaw tightened. What kind of statement? I asked. That you've been stressed. That you're acting out of character. That they're worried. Did you sign? I asked. No, she said. I said I needed to talk to you. I closed my eyes. This is what they do, I said quietly. They gather voices. I don't want to be part of this, she whispered. Then don't, I said. You don't owe them performance. What happens if I refuse? She asked. They'll be disappointed, I said, and nothing else. She exhaled shakily. I think I understand now. When the call ended, Evan slid the final draft toward me. It was clean, firm, emotionless. I do not consent to the requested delegation of authority. Any attempt to characterize my refusal as disengagement or instability is inaccurate and will be documented accordingly. All further communication should proceed through counsel. I signed it, not with shaking hands, with calm. We sent it at 3:17 p.m. At 3:42, my mother called. I didn't. At 4:10, my father called. I didn't answer. At 5:03, a message came through from my aunt. Your parents are very worried. Please call them. I turned my phone off. That evening, Mark and I sat on the balcony, watching the sky darken over the city. Yes, I replied, and they're not used to that. Are you okay? He asked. I thought about the years of compliance, the quiet adjustments, the belief that being low maintenance was a virtue. I am, I said. I just crossed the point of no return. The rehearsal dinner was the next night, the last stage they could control publicly. I already knew they would try something. They always did when cornered. What they didn't know was that I'd already decided how I would respond. Not with a scene, with absence. And that absence would say more than any argument ever could. I didn't attend the rehearsal dinner. I didn't announce it. I didn't explain. I didn't ask permission or offer excuses. At 6 o'clock, when Mark and I were supposed to arrive at the private room my parents had reserved, I was instead sitting in my apartment, phone turned off, documents neatly stacked on the dining table, breathing more easily than I had in weeks. The silence was intentional. Mark supported the decision without hesitation. They want an audience, he said. Don't give them one. I knew he was right. By choosing absence, I was refusing to play the role they'd written for me. No confrontation. No visible rebellion, just a refusal to perform unity while being quietly dismantled. I turned my phone back on around 9. There were 12 missed calls. My mother, my father, Rachel, 2 aunts, 1 cousin, even someone from my father's company I hadn't spoken to in years. No messages from the venue, no emergency, no crisis, just panic. Rachel finally got through when I answered. They're furious, she said immediately. Dad stood up to give a speech. You weren't there. I closed my eyes. What did he say? She hesitated. He talked about family, about commitment, about how sometimes stress makes people lose perspective. I pictured it perfectly. The narrative delivered to a captive audience. Concern masquerading as disappointment. And you? I asked. I didn't speak, she said. I left early. That mattered. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, I said. They decide whether they want a wedding or control more. After we hung up, I sat back and let the stillness settle. Something had shifted, not externally yet, but internally. A line had been crossed. The next morning, my mother showed up at my door. She didn't knock. She rang the bell and stood back, arms crossed, posture rigid. When I opened the door, she stepped inside without asking. That was unacceptable, she said. I closed the door behind her calmly. So was everything else. You embarrassed us, she continued. In front of everyone. I declined to participate, I replied. That's not embarrassment. Her eyes flashed. You're punishing us. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. She scoffed. From what? Your own family? I met her gaze. From manipulation. That word stopped her. You've been coached, she said finally. By that lawyer. By Mark. No, I said. I've been paying attention. She paced the living room, taking in the space like she was seeing it for the first time. Independent. Untethered. This wedding is bigger than you, she said. People have expectations. Then they can manage them, I replied. She turned sharply. If you go through with this without fixing things, there will be consequences. I waited. The trust, she said. Your position in this family. There it is, I said quietly. She didn't deny it. You're willing to lose everything over this? She asked. I thought about the documents, the clauses, the pressure, the attempt to take my signature under duress. I already lost what you're threatening, I said. I just stopped pretending otherwise. Her face hardened. You're making a mistake, she said. No, I replied. I'm making a choice. She left without another word. An hour later, Evan called. They've contacted the trust attorney again, he said, claiming you're emotionally unstable and acting against your own interests. I laughed softly. Of course they did. They want an emergency provision enacted, he continued. Temporary, to protect assets. And who decides that? I asked. The trustees, he said. Your parents. I took a slow breath. So this is it, I said. Their final move. Yes, he replied. And it confirms something important. What? They're no longer pretending this is about love, he said. It's about authority. What happens if they try to push it through? I asked. We challenge it immediately, Evan said. But Hannah, this will be public, extended family, possibly business associates. I looked around my apartment, at the quiet, at the order. I'm done being protected by silence, I said. Let it be visible. That afternoon, Rachel came over again. She looked exhausted, raw. They asked me to stand with them, she said, publicly. To say you're not yourself. And? I asked. I said no, she replied. I told them I wouldn't lie. Something in my chest loosened. They didn't take it well, she added. Mom cried, Dad yelled. I nodded. That's not your responsibility. She sat down heavily. I don't recognize them. I sat across from her. I do. I just stopped explaining it away. She looked up at me, eyes wet. What happens to us? That depends, I said gently. On whether you want a relationship or a hierarchy. She nodded slowly. That night, Evan emailed me a copy of the filing. My parents had formally requested emergency authority, citing my withdrawal from key family functions and erratic decision-making under stress. Rehearsal dinner, wedding planning, bank freeze. It was all there. I read it once. Then I replied with one sentence. Proceed. The wedding was the next day. They thought the timing would break me. They didn't realize it had already freed me. Because once you accept the loss of approval, there's nothing left to leverage. And tomorrow, in front of everyone who mattered, I would take back the one thing they could never rewrite. My voice. The morning of my wedding arrived clear and quiet. No chaos, no frantic messages, no last-minute demands. That alone felt unnatural. I woke before my alarm and lay still for a moment, listening to Mark's breathing beside me. For the first time in weeks, my chest wasn't tight. There was no urge to check my phone. No anticipation of conflict. Whatever was going to happen had already been set in motion. I got up, showered, dressed slowly. My parents didn't call. That worried me more than the pressure ever had. By 9 a.m., Evan texted. They filed the emergency request at 7:42. Judge declined to act without a hearing, scheduled for Monday. I exhaled. They'd tried to pull the trigger, too late. The venue buzzed with activity when we arrived. Florists, coordinators, music checks, everything exactly as I'd planned it. The seating chart was intact. My name was where it belonged. Mark squeezed my hand when he noticed. They didn't win, he murmured. Not today, I replied. Rachel arrived just before noon. She looked pale but determined, wearing the dress we'd picked together months earlier. She hugged me tightly, longer than usual. They're here, she said quietly. I know, I replied. They're composed, she added. Too composed. I nodded. They think they still have a move. The ceremony began on time. The lake was still. Guests settled into their seats. Soft music drifted across the water. For a moment, everything felt suspended, like the world had agreed to pause. I walked down the aisle without looking at my parents. I didn't need to. I could feel them, watching, measuring, waiting. The vows were simple, honest, steady. When Mark said my name, when he promised to choose me without condition, something in me finally let go of the last thread I'd been holding for years. This was my family now. At the reception, my parents approached me together. My mother smiled, too widely. My father's expression was controlled, eyes sharp. "We should talk," he said. After the speeches, I replied calmly. His jaw tightened. "This is important." "So is today," I said. "Pick one." They walked away. Rachel spoke first. She didn't mention family unity. She didn't mention stress. She spoke about honesty, about how easy it is to confuse love with expectation, about how proud she was of me. I saw my mother's smile falter. Then my father stood. The room quieted. He cleared his throat. "Hannah has always been independent," he began. There it was again. "And sometimes," he continued, "independence can look like distance." I felt Mark's hand tighten around mine. "But family," my father said, voice firm, "requires cohesion." The word echoed through the room. I stood. Not abruptly, not angrily, just enough to interrupt. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, carrying farther than I expected. "This isn't the place." Every head turned. He froze. "You're right," I continued. "Family does require cohesion, but not at the cost of consent." The silence was absolute. "This is my wedding," I said calmly, "and I'm choosing peace." I sat back down. No applause. No gasps. Just a shift. My father didn't continue his speech. He returned to his seat. The rest of the evening unfolded gently. Guests laughed, danced. The tension softened as people realized nothing explosive was coming. That was the most disarming part. Later that night, as the reception wound down, my mother cornered me near the exit. "You've humiliated us," she whispered. "No," I said. "I declined to participate in your story." "This isn't over," she said. "I know," I replied. "But today is." As Mark and I left, I didn't look back. On the drive to the hotel, my phone buzzed. A message from Evan. "Good job. See you Monday." I rested my head against the window and watched the city lights blur past. The wedding was over. The performance they'd tried to script had failed. And on Monday, the consequences they'd delayed for years would finally arrive. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I stopped absorbing the damage meant for everyone else. And that, I knew now, was the most dangerous thing I could have done. Monday came faster than I expected, not because time moved quickly, but because for the first time, I wasn't resisting it. I woke up without dread, without the old instinct to brace myself for damage control. The wedding was behind me. The line had been crossed in public. Whatever happened next would happen in daylight. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. I didn't go in wearing anything symbolic. No power suit, no armor, just a simple navy dress and flats. I wasn't there to perform stability. I was there to state facts. My parents were already seated when Mark and I entered the courtroom. My mother didn't look at me. My father did. Once. Long enough to register that this version of me wasn't bending. Evan arrived moments later, calm as always, a thin file tucked under his arm. The judge was efficient. No patience for family theatrics. She'd already read the emergency request, the affidavits, the language about my alleged instability. She turned to my father first. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "you've requested temporary authority based on concerns about your daughter's capacity. Can you provide specific evidence of incapacity?" My father stood. He spoke about stress, about withdrawal, about missed events, about concern. He did not speak about documents. When he finished, the judge nodded once and turned to Evan. "Mr. Morales?" Evan stood. "My client declined to attend a rehearsal dinner," he said evenly. "She froze unauthorized financial activity tied to her historical authorization. She declined to sign an emergency delegation sent under time pressure. None of these actions constitute incapacity." He handed the clerk a folder. "They constitute boundaries." The judge skimmed the documents. "These emails," she said, looking up, "show attempts to secure her signature within hours, framed as urgent family necessity." "Yes," Evan replied. Coercive time. My mother shifted in her seat. The judge continued reading. And this trust clause, she added, ties financial consequence to subjective interpretations of cohesion. She looked directly at my parents. That is not a medical determination, she said. Nor is it grounds for emergency authority. She denied the request. Just like that. No warning, no lecture, no drama. Denied. My father sat down slowly. The judge wasn't finished. I also have concerns, she continued, about the repeated use of financial mechanisms to influence personal decisions unrelated to asset management. She set the file down. I am ordering a full review of trustee conduct. The room felt suddenly smaller. My mother's face went pale. Outside the courtroom, my father approached me. Not angry, not pleading. Careful, you've made your point, he said. This has gone far enough. I met his eyes. It went far enough before the wedding, I said. I just stopped pretending it hadn't. You've put your mother under immense strain, he said. I nodded. She chose this structure. He exhaled sharply. What do you want? The question felt almost absurd now. I want nothing, I said. I want distance. He stared at me, like he couldn't process the idea of a relationship without leverage. That's not how families work, he said. It's how healthy ones do, I replied. Rachel was waiting for me outside. They lost, she said quietly. They overreached, I replied. She swallowed. Mom's furious. I know. She says you've destroyed the family. I shook my head. I exposed it. Rachel nodded slowly. I'm stepping back. That mattered more than anything else she could have said. That evening, Mark and I unpacked our wedding gifts in silence. Cards, notes, well wishes from people who had no idea what had almost overshadowed the day. I placed my parents' card in a drawer without opening it. I didn't need to know what it said. Later, as I stood by the window watching dusk settle over the city, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from my mother. We need to talk. This isn't how this was supposed to go. I typed one sentence back. That's the point. I turned the phone off and set it face down. The control they'd relied on for decades had failed because it required my participation. And I was done participating. The review would take weeks, maybe months, but the outcome no longer defined me. I had already taken back the one thing they'd been trying to manage since I was old enough to be called independent, my right to choose. And in the quiet after the storm, that choice felt like freedom. The review moved slowly, exactly the way things do when there's nothing left to hide. No emergency motions, no dramatic filings, just requests, subpoenas, emails sent at measured intervals. The kind of process my parents had always relied on, to exhaust people who didn't have the patience or resources to endure it. They underestimated one thing. I wasn't trying to win quickly. I was trying to end it correctly. 2 weeks after the hearing, Evan called with an update. The trustees have been ordered to provide a full accounting, he said. All amendments, all discretionary decisions, all communications tied to beneficiary conduct. I leaned back in my chair. Including internal emails? Yes, he replied. Especially those. I pictured my mother at her desk, carefully phrasing messages she'd assumed would never leave the family. My father, confident that authority erased accountability. When will we see it? I asked. Soon, Evan said. And Hannah, there's something else. I waited. They've suspended your parents as acting trustees, pending review. I closed my eyes. Not relief, not triumph, just a quiet sense of inevitability. Who takes over? I asked. An independent fiduciary, he said. Court appointed. That changed everything. It meant no more discretion. No more reinterpretation, no more leverage disguised as concern. When I told Mark, he simply nodded. They finally ran into a system that doesn't care who they are, he said. Rachel called that night. They're furious, she said. Dad says you went too far. Did he say what part wasn't true? I asked. She hesitated. No, then that's his answer, I said. She sighed. Mom won't stop crying. I'm not responsible for managing her emotions, I replied. Neither are you. There was a long pause. I moved out, Rachel said. That surprised me. Where? I asked. A short-term rental, she said. I needed space. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's a good start. A few days later, the first batch of documents arrived. Hundreds of pages. Evan called me into his office to go through them together. Patterns emerged quickly. Emails discussing how Hannah won't push back. Notes about how my independence made me less risky to disappoint. Repeated references to Rachel's fragility as justification for prioritizing her. And then one email, sent by my father to the trust attorney 3 years earlier. Hannah values autonomy. She'll accept reduced involvement if framed as her choice. I stared at the screen. That was never my choice, I said. No, Evan replied. It was their assumption. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the casual certainty with which they believed they could script my reactions. That my silence meant consent. That my competence meant compliance. They didn't think of you as a person in this, Evan said. They thought of you as a variable. That night, I sat alone on the balcony again, city lights flickering on below. I thought about all the moments I'd swallowed discomfort because it seemed easier. All the times I told myself it wasn't worth the conflict. I hadn't been avoiding conflict. I'd been preserving a structure that required my invisibility. My mother sent another message. I don't recognize you anymore. I typed back slowly. You never did. I didn't send anything else. The next development came unexpectedly. My father's company announced a leadership change. Temporary, they said. Health reasons. No one asked questions publicly, but in private, people noticed. Clients hesitated. Board members shifted. Reputation doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. Evan didn't comment on it. He didn't need to. This will settle, he said, when I asked how long the review would take. These things always do, once the leverage is gone. And after, I asked? After, he replied. You decide how much contact you want. That question stayed with me, because for the first time, distance wasn't punishment. It was an option, one I'd never been allowed to consider. By the end of the month, the independent trustee issued preliminary findings. Misuse of discretionary authority. Failure to disclose material conditions. Pattern of coercive timing tied to personal milestones. Plain language. No emotion. The trust would be restructured. Equitably. Without behavioral conditions. Rachel called me when she heard. They can't control it anymore, she said. No, I replied. They can't. What happens to us? She asked. I thought about that carefully. That depends on whether you want a relationship, I said, or a hierarchy. She was quiet. I want a relationship, she said. That will take time, I replied. And honesty. I'm willing, she said. That mattered. As for my parents, they didn't call. They didn't apologize. They waited. They always had. But waiting only works when someone is still listening. And I wasn't. The final report arrived on the Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after the preliminary findings. I knew what it would say before I opened it. Not because I was arrogant, because by then, the pattern was undeniable. Once the leverage was removed, once the story could no longer be shaped by selective silence, the truth had nowhere left to hide. The independent trustee's conclusions were clear. The trust would be permanently restructured. Equal distribution. No behavioral clauses. No discretionary penalties tied to family participation. No vague language that could be bent to serve whoever held authority at the moment. My parents would remain beneficiaries. They would no longer be gatekeepers. When Evan finished walking me through the final pages, he closed the file and looked at me carefully. How do you feel? He asked. I thought about it. Not relieved. Not victorious. Not angry. Finished, I said. He nodded. That's usually the healthiest outcome. The money was transferred the following week. Clean. Direct. No conditions attached. I didn't celebrate. I paid off my remaining student loans. I set aside a modest investment account. I donated a portion quietly to a legal aid organization that helped people navigate family and estate disputes they couldn't afford to fight. The rest, I left alone. I wanted the absence of urgency to be the point. My parents didn't attend the final meeting. They sent their attorney. No message, no request to speak. No attempt to repair anything now that the system no longer bent in their favor. That, more than anything else, told me who they were when control was removed. Rachel and I met for coffee a month later. Not at my parents' house. Not at the place we'd grown up performing closeness. A neutral cafe. Sunlit. Quiet. She looked different. Less polished. More real. I've been thinking a lot, she said, stirring her cup slowly, about how much of my life was built around not disappointing them. I nodded. Me too. They keep waiting for me to come back, she said, to smooth things over. And will you? I asked. She shook her head. Not like before. That was enough. We didn't promise closeness. We didn't rewrite history. We just agreed to speak honestly, even when it was uncomfortable. That was more than we'd ever had. My mother sent one final message. I hope one day you understand. We did what we thought was best. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I typed back. I understand. That's why I stepped away. She didn't reply. Mark and I settled into married life quietly. No grand declarations. No need to prove anything. One evening, as we were unpacking the last of the wedding boxes, he asked me something unexpected. Do you miss them? He said. I thought carefully before answering. I miss the idea of them, I said. The version where love wasn't conditional. He nodded. That makes sense. I didn't miss the control. I didn't miss the obligation. I didn't miss the constant calculation of how much of myself I was allowed to bring into the room. What surprised me most in the months that followed was how much energy I suddenly had. When you're no longer managing other people's expectations, life gets quieter, wider, more honest. I slept better. I laughed more. I stopped bracing for conversations that never came. Here's the lesson I took from all of it, and I'll keep it simple. Family drama doesn't always look like shouting or cruelty. Sometimes it looks like contracts, like conditions, like love offered only when you behave correctly. Being excluded isn't always about absence. Sometimes it's about being present without power. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't require humiliation or confrontation. Sometimes it's as simple as documentation, as distance, as refusing to sign what was designed to erase you. The moment you stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you, the tables turn. Not because they lose, but because you stop losing. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear why. Have you ever been quietly controlled, excluded, or manipulated by the people who said they were acting in your best interest? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about family drama, betrayal, inheritance, revenge, and the calm moments when karma finally arrives, like, subscribe, and stay with me. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting back. It's choosing yourself and walking away without asking permission.